Oh, okay. Well, so this was a nice paper. This is not the first paper to mention this, but it's a fairly recent one that is looking at this thing called the greening of Earth. And uh, if some people have heard of this, but a lot of people have not. And in many ways, this is like a huge good news story that you would expect people would be excited about, environmentalists, because what they've done is, yeah, you
Yes,
want to take
the
over?
main feature of this paper is that the simplest question we ask: rising carbon dioxide in the air, in the atmosphere, what does it do to the planetary system? We know that we've been searching how it affects thermometers and the land, ocean, all these other things. But the most obvious thing was basically CO2 as a fertilizer, right? So it's greening the planet. But the main point about this paper is that the data from this virus satellite project from NOAA has been often updated to till 2013, 2018. First paper was published in 2018 by this famous group from Peking University, Shilong Piao. The Piao is the leader. And then, of course, Ranga Mayeni from Boston. So we just basically want to provide the most recent published kind of record, and let's see where the data goes. So
Yeah,
Roland, continue.
and just to say,
Just,
oh yeah,
just,
Michael, you want to
just,
say?
just to expand a bit on the idea of carbon dioxide being a plant fertilizer. This is well known among horticulturalists. People who grow plants in greenhouses normally enrich it with carbon dioxide. They can put a higher level of carbon dioxide into it, and this increases their yield. And in fact, in our research facilities here, where we grow a lot of algae and that sort of thing, we elevate the carbon dioxide level in order to increase our algae yields. So the idea that increasing the level of carbon dioxide will increase plant growth is well known and commercially exploited by most horticulturalists. So it's just
Yeah,
that's good, Willie.
yeah, Willie, you
Yeah,
want?
for winter vegetation, fruit, all your supermarket tomatoes during winters. I mean, I know a very old number from about 2000 in Canada. It's $1 billion industry. That's all I want to say. And most of the costs actually come from, trying to make the air in content in this greenhouse very, very high, like 1,000 parts per million, things like that. I mean, the atmosphere outside, if you all may know, is about 410, 420, that kind of stuff.
Yes. So when these studies first started coming out, so what there are these satellites. The first ones were launched in the 1980s. Now this study is focusing on the MODIS one that was launched in 2000. Was about 2000. So this one is specifically looking at 2000. But as they say, since the early 1980s, satellite observations reveal a consistent increasing trend in global vegetation greenness, and that's using typically what they call the NDVI, um, which is basically showing how much green there is on the planet in different regions. And the key bit is there's a lot of debate of the causes. Um, all of the studies are showing that the biggest factor is actually the increasing atmospheric CO2, because CO2 is plant food. And this is by groups that were very concerned about CO2 causing climate change. And we can talk into this, but they are saying, well, no, the biggest factor is actually CO2. And they're also greening that there's positive effects of climate change. Now, they will say, Deborah said, there is direct changes in land use and management. So those are the three big factors. Um, and so this is a big plot going from 2000. This is the average amount of green across the planet, and you can see it's increasing. And this is specifically looking at the regions. They're saying the bits that have dark green have shown the most amount of greening, and there are some regions that show that there's been a reduction in greening. There's less plant life. doing it. But I think you can, most people looking at this can see it's green, a lot of green.
I think there's just one, just to summarize the statistics. I think we move on to the next slide. Before the next slide will be to say that, yeah, there are some drying, but the quantitative numbers is actually about 65% or so of this area of the earth is actually green, net green, right?
Yeah.
Main
Yeah.
area you already can see Midwest of USA, northern Australia, even southern Australia, and then India, China, and then Central Asia, and then kind of Equatorial Africa, even a little bit in the south near Brazil. And you will see what the pattern represent in the next slide, I think.
Yeah, Michael, did you want to say something?
Just what we're going to be looking at here and what we're seeing here is just general vegetation, whether it's crop yields or whether it's wild plants that are going on.
Yeah,
But even just looking at uh, crop yields, the yield of crops per hectare has increased over the period as well. You
yeah.
know,
People who were listening to our podcast last week, referred to a study by Professor Ross McKittrick that is finding that that's having implications for the so-called social cost of carbon. That it's they're realizing this CO2 fertilization is actually saying, "Hey, this has benefits." So really, you were reminding us of this
Right.
nice.
This is a very old story. For some of you who may be not even familiar, so we re-summarize for you. There is a very famous map created by the UN Environmental Program. So UNEP is part of IPCC, of course. In 2005, they had to provide this sort of promotional campaign. Basically, if CO2 temperature is not warming, is not going to kill you. If greening of the planet Earth is not going to kill us all, it will be climate refugee. So that's a scary story. But the thing we want to highlight here is, of course, they say 50 million climate refugee by 2010. And then when it comes 2011, you see that they update. They say it'll be by 2020. And then even 2020 has passed now. You ask the same thing. Where are all the 50 million climate refugees? But the main thing we want to feature in this graph is that yellow region where they claim that these are the region that will be suffering from droughts. What else, Ronan? They say droughts and
Droughts
desertification.
and desertification.
So it has a tie back to this map
So,
that is produced
so
by the Peking group.
this is perfect for doing because the MODIS data has been running from 2000 up to present and is now able to tell us what areas have shown desertification, what areas have shown greening. Well, it turns out that it's pretty much all of the regions that they were warning will become deserts and have climate refugees have actually experienced a huge amount of greening.
Yeah.
They're, yeah,
I think it's very simple to explain. This is another well-known thing that Michael can tell you all day long about this topic. Obviously, about
yeah.
it's basically
Uh,
related to how. Yeah,
the
go ahead.
mistake a lot of people make is that they assume that, say, organizations like the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is a science organization. It's not. It was set up for to as a marketing organization. So its function is to market UN ideologies. It's not to do with science at all. Now
yeah,
we've got to admire them because they're doing a brilliant job. Most people accept the UN ideologies based on the IPCC's entire marketing strategies. But we have to distinguish between a marketing organization and a science organization. And the IPCC was set up as a marketing organization.
yeah, yeah. You wanted to say
Yeah,
something.
I just want to finish off. It's just basically the phenomenon of basically the stomata. The reason why we have all these so-called region that's supposed to suffer from droughts and desertification
Yeah,
actually turning green is
yeah,
really explained in a sense from this air fertilization.
yeah,
Basically the plants is able to conserve water. It's even more efficient, right? There are people who understand about botany who would say that the stomata behind all these leaves are actually closing up, so losing less water. So in that sense, it really explained that the phenomenon of a higher carbon dioxide concentration is beneficial to the plant kingdom.
Yeah, yeah. So just to elaborate on what Willie was saying, and then we'll move on to the next paper. But yeah, if you look, and there's this difference between C4 plants and C3 plants, which, but broadly, if we look at all plants, the if you look at the leaves, particularly under a microscope, it's even clearer. There are these little holes, pores on the leaves of plants, which allow exchange of gases. And the plants want to hold on to the water that they've taken up through their roots. Most plants are trying to hold on to that. And so if they make the holes too big to allow the CO2 in, then they will be losing evaporation, they'll be losing water. So they ideally, the more CO2 there is in their environment when the leaf is growing, the smaller they'll make those stomata, and then that will improve the efficiency. And so when you increase the CO2 concentration as the plant is growing, that means it's able to hold on to its water longer. And for a lot of plants, that means that they can get better growths, and so it's more productive.